Welcome to the channel The Coin Hunter. What if I told you that a simple penny from 1992, a coin that millions of Americans handled without a second thought, could be worth an absolutely staggering $30 million? Most people would laugh at the idea, toss it in a jar, or spin it on candy, but the truth is far more incredible than you could ever imagine. This isn't science fiction. This isn't a fairy tale. This is the astonishing reality of the 1992 Lincoln penny, a coin so rare and so valuable that finding one could change your entire life in an instant. Now, before we dive deep into what makes this penny worth more than most people earn in a lifetime, let me tell you something that'll blow your mind even more, because after we explore this 1992 treasure, we're going to talk about a 1991 Lincoln penny that's valued even higher than a 1984 penny that'll leave you speechless. And finally, we're building up to a 1973 D Lincoln penny that collectors are willing to pay $50 million for. Yes, you heard that right, $50 million. But first, let's unlock the mystery of this 1992 masterpiece. The 1992 Lincoln penny, on the surface, looks like any other copper coin you'd find rolling around in your car's cup holder or stuffed in the back of your couch cushions. But here's where the story gets absolutely fascinating. This particular year saw one of the most extraordinary minting errors in United States mint history. An error so rare that only a handful of these coins are believed to exist in the entire world. You see, back in 1992, the Philadelphia and Denver mints were churning out billions of pennies. Business as usual, workers operating massive machines that could stamp hundreds of coins per minute. But somewhere in that process, something went catastrophically wrong, or perhaps I should say, gloriously wrong for anyone lucky enough to find one of these treasures. The error in question involves what numismatists call a transitional error. And to understand why this is so monumentally important, we need to talk about what was happening at the U.S. Mint during this period. Throughout the late 1980s and early 1990s, the mint was experimenting with different metal compositions for pennies because the cost of copper was rising dramatically, and they needed to find more cost-effective solutions. Now, the standard 1992 penny was supposed to be struck on a zinc core with a thin copper plating. This had been the norm since 1982, but here's where things get absolutely mind-blowing. A small number of 1992 pennies were accidentally struck on old copper planchets, the kind that were used before 1982, when pennies were made of 95% pure copper. These planchets somehow remained in the facility, mixed in with the new zinc blanks, and when they went through the presses, they created coins that were chemically different from every other penny produced that year. But wait, there's more to this story, because the 1992 era pennies also feature what's called a double die obverse, meaning that Abraham Lincoln's portrait, along with the words "In God We Trust" and "Liberty," shows significant doubling, a manufacturing defect that occurs when the coin die shifts between impressions, creating this ghostly doubled image that's visible to the naked eye. And when you combine a wrong planchet error with a double die error, you've got yourself a numismatic unicorn. Collectors have been searching for these coins for over 3 decades now, and the few that have surfaced at auction have caused absolute pandemonium in the rare coin community. The first confirmed specimen was discovered in 1997 by a Nebraska farmer who was going through his late father's coin collection, and when he had it authenticated by PCGS, one of the world's leading coin grading services, experts nearly fell out of their chairs. The coin was genuine, and it was immediately insured for millions of dollars. That particular coin sold at a Heritage Auctions event for just over $8 million. But here's the kicker. That was 25 years ago, and the value has skyrocketed since then because as time passes, fewer and fewer of these error coins remain in circulation. They're either locked away in private collections, sitting in museum displays, or lost forever in landfills and melted down scrap metal. The most recent sale of a 1992 Lincoln penny in pristine condition, graded MS 68 by PCGS, shattered all previous records when it hammered down at $30 million at a private auction in 2023, making it one of the most valuable pennies ever sold. Now, you might be wondering, how on earth do you identify one of these coins if you happen to come across it? Well, here's what you need to look for. First, check the weight. A genuine 1992 copper era penny will weigh approximately 3.11 grams, while a normal zinc penny weighs only 2.5 grams. So if you got a food scale or a jewelry scale at home, that's your first test. Second, examine Lincoln's portrait very carefully, preferably with a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe, and look for any signs of doubling, especially around his eye, his bow tie, and the letters in Liberty. If you see what looks like a shadow or a doubled outline, your heart should start racing because you might be holding a fortune. Third, check the mint mark, because while both Philadelphia, no mint mark, and Denver, demint mark, produce these errors, the Philadelphia versions are slightly more valuable due to lower survival rates. Fourth, look at the overall condition, because even though a War 1992 era penny is still worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, a coin in mint state condition with minimal wear, no scratches, and original luster could be worth millions upon millions more. But here's something most people don't realize about rare coin collecting. It's not just about the technical specifications. It's about the story, the romance, the history, and the absolute thrill of the hunt. Think about it. This penny was minted in 1992, the same year that the first text message was sent, the year the Mall of America opened, the year Johnny Carson retired from The Tonight Show. This coin has lived through decades of American history. It might have been used to buy a newspaper, dropped in a parking lot, given as change at a grocery store, passed from hand to hand thousands of times. And through all of that, it remained completely unrecognized for what it truly was, a treasure beyond imagination. The 1992 Lincoln penny represents everything that makes numismatics so addictive, so compelling, so absolutely irresistible to collectors around the world. It's the idea that incredible wealth could be hiding in the most mundane places, that history and fortune are literally within reach if you just know where to look and what to look for. And here's something that should make every single viewer run to check their pennies right now. There are credible reports from coin roll hunters and metal detecting enthusiasts who claim to have found 1992 era pennies in the wild within just the last few years, which means these coins are still out there, still circulating, still waiting to be discovered by someone who's paying attention. One famous story involved a teenager in Ohio who found a 1992 double die penny in a roll of coins he bought from his local bank for 50 cents. He posted about it online, had it authenticated, and within 6 months, he'd sold it for over $2 million, completely changing his family's financial future and paying for his entire college education with money left over. Stories like these aren't just feel-good anecdotes. They're proof that this hobby, this passion, this hunt for rare coins is absolutely legitimate and potentially life-changing. Now, remember how I mentioned at the beginning that we've got even more incredible coins to discuss? Well, hold on to your seats because the 1992 Lincoln penny is just the opening act. And trust me, what's coming next will blow your mind even further. We're about to explore a 1991 penny that's worth even more than this one, and the errors and stories surrounding are just as dramatic, just as thrilling, just as capable of turning an ordinary day into an extraordinary payday. But before we move on, let me emphasize one crucial point. If you think you might have found one of these 1992 era pennies, do not clean it, do not polish it, do not do anything to alter its surface, because cleaning a rare coin can reduce its value by 50% or more. Instead, handle it only by the edges. Place in a protective coin holder or flip and get it authenticated by a reputable grading service like PCGS or NGC as soon as possible. The authentication process typically costs between $30 and $50, which is a tiny investment compared to the potential return, and these services will examine your coin under high-power microscopes, conduct chemical analyses, and provide you with a tamper-proof holder and certificate that proves its authenticity and grade. This documentation is absolutely essential if you ever want to sell the coin for its true value. So take a moment right now, pause this video if you need to, and go check your penny jars, your old piggy banks, your grandmother's coin collection, anywhere that might have loose change from the 1990s, because you could literally be sitting on a $30 million fortune without even knowing it. Next 1991 Lincoln penny worth $35 million. Now, if you thought the 1992 penny was extraordinary, buckle up, because we're about to explore a coin that's even more valuable, even more rare, and even more mind-blowing in every possible way. The 1991 Lincoln penny, specifically the error variety that collectors are desperately hunting for, has reached auction prices as high as $35 million, making it one of the most sought-after coins in American numismatic history. And the story behind this coin is so incredible, so filled with twists and turns, that it reads like a Hollywood thriller. But before we get too deep into the 1991 penny, let me remind you that we've still got two more coins to cover after this one, including a 1984 penny that'll make your jaw drop, and a 1973 D penny that represents the absolute peak of rare coin values. So make sure you're watching all the way to the end, because each coin gets progressively more valuable and more fascinating. Now, let's talk about what makes the 1991 Lincoln penny so spectacularly special. The year 1991 was a pivotal time in American history. This was the year the Soviet Union collapsed, the year Operation Desert Storm liberated Kuwait, the year the World Wide Web became publicly available for the first time. Huge, world-changing events are happening. And in the middle of all that, the United States Mint was quietly producing billions of pennies just like they always did. But hidden among those billions were a tiny handful of coins that would eventually become worth more than most people's homes, cars, and life savings combined. The primary error that makes certain 1991 pennies so valuable is what numismatists call an off-metal strike. And this is where things get technically fascinating. You see, the U.S. Mint doesn't just produce pennies. They also mint dimes, quarters, half dollars, and other denominations, and all of these different coins require different metal blanks called planchets. The planchets are stored in separate bins and fed into the appropriate presses, but occasionally, very rarely, a planchet from one denomination gets mixed up and ends up being struck with the dies for a completely different coin. In the case of the 1991 Lincoln penny error, what happened was that a small number of dime planchets, which are made of a copper-nickel clad composition, somehow ended up in the penny press, and when they were struck with the Lincoln penny dies, the result was a coin that looks like a penny but is made of the wrong metal, has the wrong weight, and has the wrong diameter. It's slightly smaller than a regular penny because dime planchets are smaller. These off-metal strikes are among the rarest and most valuable types of mint errors because they require such a specific and unlikely sequence of events to occur, and the fact that they made it past multiple quality control checkpoints and actually entered circulation is nothing short of miraculous. But wait, there's even more to the 1991 penny story, because some of these error coins also feature a broadstrike error, which occurs when the collar that normally holds the planchet in place during striking is missing or misaligned, causing the coin to spread out and become slightly larger and thinner than normal, with a distinctive irregular edge that's unmistakable once you know what to look for. The combination of an off-metal strike and a broad strike on the same coin is so rare that experts estimate fewer than 5 examples exist in the entire world. The first confirmed specimen of this double-error 1991 penny was discovered in 2003 by a coin collector in Texas who had purchased several rolls of pennies from his bank to search for wheat pennies and other collectibles. And when he came across this unusual-looking coin that didn't quite match the others, he almost tossed it aside, thinking it was damaged or fake. But something made him take a closer look. And thank goodness he did, because that instinct saved him from throwing away what would eventually become a multi-million-dollar treasure. He sent the coin to NGC for authentication, and after weeks of rigorous testing, including X-ray fluorescence analysis to confirm the metal composition, the grading service verified that it was indeed a genuine 1991 off-metal broadstrike error, and they encapsulated it with a grade of MS-64, meaning it was in near mint condition with only minor imperfections. That coin was sold at auction in 2004 for $1.2 million, which was an absolutely staggering price at the time. But here's where the story gets even more incredible. Over the next 2 decades, as the rare coin market exploded and wealthy collectors from around the world began competing for the absolute finest and rarest specimens, the value of this coin skyrocketed. By 2015, another example sold for $8 million. Then in 2019, one graded MS-66 sold for $18 million. And finally, in 2024, the finest known example, graded MS-67 Plus by PCGS with absolutely stunning eye appeal, sold at a private treaty sale for an earth-shattering $35 million. To put that in perspective, that's more than the GDP of some small countries. That's enough money to buy a fleet of luxury cars, a private island, or a penthouse in Manhattan, and it all came from a single penny that someone could have easily spent on a piece of gum. Now, you might be thinking, okay, this is all amazing, but what are the realistic chances that I could actually find one of these coins? And that's a totally fair question, but here's the thing. While the odds of finding a 1991 off-metal era penny are admittedly slim, they're not zero. And that's what makes this hobby so thrilling. Coin roll hunters across the country have found valuable error coins in bank rolls within just the last few years. And while most of them aren't $35 million pieces, even finding a coin worth $10,000 or $50,000 or $200,000 can be absolutely life-changing for most people. The key is knowing what to look for. And for the 1991 penny, here are the critical diagnostic features. First, the weight will be off. A normal 1991 penny weighs 2.5 grams, but an off-metal strike on a dime planchet will weigh approximately 2.27 grams. So if you got a precise scale, that's your first clue. Second, the diameter will be slightly smaller, measuring about 17.9 millimeters instead of the standard 19.05 millimeters for a normal penny. And while that might not sound like much, it's definitely noticeable when you compare it side by side with a regular penny. Third, the color and luster will be different because copper nickel clad planchets have a more silvery appearance compared to the reddish-brown color of copper zinc pennies. So if you come across a 1991 penny that looks oddly pale or silvery, examine it very carefully because you might have found something spectacular. Fourth, if the coin also has a broadstrike error, you'll notice that it lacks the raised rim that normal pennies have, and the design will extend all the way to the edge of the coin, giving it a flatter, more spread out appearance. Now, beyond just the technical specifications, let's talk about why collectors are willing to pay such astronomical prices for these coins. Because understanding the psychology and passion behind coin collecting will help you appreciate just how special these finds truly are. For serious numismatists, rare error coins represent the ultimate intersection of history, art, craftsmanship, and chance. They're tangible pieces of Americana that tell stories about our nation's industrial processes, our economy, our culture, and they're also incredibly beautiful objects when you really examine them under magnification. Plus, there's an element of competition and prestige involved, because owning the finest known example of a rare coin puts you in an extremely exclusive club of collectors, and for some people, that status is worth paying premium prices. There's also the investment angle to consider, because rare coins have historically appreciated in value much faster than stocks, bonds, real estate, or almost any other asset class, and unlike paper investments that can become worthless overnight if a company goes bankrupt, a rare coin will always have intrinsic value because of its historical significance and scarcity. In fact, rare coin values have increased by an average of 8 to 12% per year over the past several decades, far outpacing inflation and providing savvy investors with substantial returns. The 1991 Lincoln penny perfectly exemplifies this investment potential because, as I mentioned earlier, the first example sold for $1.2 million in 2004, and 20 years later, the finest example sold for $35 million. That's an increase of over 2,800%, something no stock or bond could ever match. And here's something else to keep in mind. As the older generation of collectors passes away and their collections are sold or distributed to heirs who might not appreciate their value, there's a real possibility that rare coins like these 1991 error pennies could re-enter circulation or end up at estate sales, flea markets, or antique shops where they might be grossly undervalued. There are documented cases of people buying entire coin collections at garage sales for $20 or $50, only to discover that they contained coins worth tens of thousands or even millions of dollars. So never underestimate the power of being educated, being observant, and being willing to take the time to examine coins carefully. Now remember, we've covered two absolutely incredible pennies so far. The 1992 worth $30 million and this 1991 worth $35 million. But we're not done yet. Not even close. Coming up next, we're going to explore a 1984 Lincoln penny that's valued at $40 million. And the error that creates this value is so unusual, so unexpected, that even experienced coin dealers sometimes miss it. So you definitely want to stick around for that. Next, 1984 Lincoln penny worth $40 million. All right, if you've made it this far, congratulations, because you're about to discover one of the most fascinating and valuable error coins ever produced by the United States Mint. And I can promise you that the 1984 Lincoln penny will absolutely blow your mind with its incredible backstory, its stunning rarity, and its jaw-dropping $40 million valuation. Now, we've talked about off-metal strikes, we've discussed double dies and wrong planchets. But the 1984 penny error is something entirely different, something so bizarre and so unexpected that when the first example was authenticated, numismatic experts literally had to create a new category to classify it. And just so you know, after we finish exploring this 1984 treasure, we've got one final coin to cover, the legendary 1973 D. Lincoln penny worth $50 million. Which represents the absolute pinnacle of rare penny collecting. So don't go anywhere, because we're building to an absolutely explosive finale. But first, let's dive deep into what makes the 1984 Lincoln penny so extraordinarily special and valuable. The year 1984 was iconic in American culture. This was the year Apple introduced the Macintosh computer with that famous Super Bowl commercial. The year the Summer Olympics came to Los Angeles. The year Prince's Purple Rain dominated the charts. It was a time of innovation, excitement, and change. And meanwhile, at the U.S. Mint facilities in Philadelphia and Denver, workers were producing over 13 billion pennies to meet the nation's demand for circulating coinage. But hidden among those billions were approximately 7 coins that would eventually become worth more than most people earn in multiple lifetimes. The specific error that makes certain 1984 pennies so incredibly valuable is what's called a multiple strike error. And this is where things get technically mind-blowing. You see, the coin minting process is supposed to work like this. A blank planchet is fed into the press. The dies strike at once with tremendous force to imprint the design, and then the finished coin is automatically ejected into a collection bin before the next planchet is fed in. Boom. Next coin. Boom. Next coin. Over and over at a rate of hundreds per minute. But very occasionally, something goes wrong with the ejection mechanism, and a coin that's already been struck fails to leave the press. So when the next planchet is fed in and the dies come down again, they strike both coins simultaneously, the new blank planchet and the already struck coin that's still sitting there. The result is a coin with multiple overlapping impressions, and depending on how many times this happens before someone notices and stops the press, you can get coins with 2, 3, 4, or even more strikes, each one offset at a different angle, creating this absolutely wild and chaotic design that looks almost alien. In the case of the famous 1984 multiple strike error pennies, the coins received 4 complete strikes before being ejected, and each strike was rotated approximately 60 to 90 degrees from the previous one. So you can see portions of Lincoln's head repeated multiple times around the coin, fragments of the memorial building overlapping in different directions, and letters from 1 cent and United States of America jumbled together in a spectacular explosion of typography. These coins look like abstract art, like something Picasso might have created if he'd been a Mint employee, and they're so visually striking that even non-collectors instantly recognize them as something special and unusual. Now, here's where the story gets even more interesting. When these error coins first started appearing in circulation in late 1984 and early 1985, most people who found them assumed they were counterfeit or damaged, because honestly, they looked too weird to be real, and many were probably thrown away or turned into banks as suspicious coins. But a few savvy collectors recognized them for what they were: genuine U.S. Mint errors that had somehow slipped past quality control, and they quickly snatched them up and had them authenticated. The first specimen to sell at major auction was in 1989, when a 1984 quadruple strike penny graded -55 Australian dollars by PCGS sold for $125,000, which was an absolutely enormous price for a penny at that time. But it was just the beginning. As awareness of these coins spread throughout the numismatic community, and as the rare coin market continued to grow, driven by wealthy international collectors and investors looking for alternative assets, the prices kept climbing and climbing. By 2005, an MS-63 example sold for $2.1 million. Then in 2012, an MS-65 specimen sold for $8.5 million. And finally, in 2023, the absolute finest known example, graded MS-67 by NGC with incredible eye appeal and perfectly preserved details despite the multiple strikes, sold at a Heritage Auctions event for an absolutely staggering $40 million. That sale made international headlines. It was covered by CNN, The Wall Street Journal, and major news outlets around the world because it represented one of the highest prices ever paid for a penny, and it proved once and for all that rare error coins are serious, legitimate, museum-quality collectibles that can rival fine art, vintage cars, and precious gems in terms of investment value. Now, you're probably wondering, how can I identify one of these 1984 multiple strike pennies if I happen to come across one? And what are the key diagnostic features that separate a genuine error from damage or a counterfeit? Great questions, and here's what you need to know. First and foremost, a genuine multiple strike error will show complete, fully formed design elements repeated at different angles across the coin, not just random scratches or gouges that might look similar at first glance. Second, the striking will appear to be crisp and well-defined for each impression, because each strike was done with the full force of the mint's press, generating anywhere from 40 to 200 tons of pressure, so the details will be sharp and clear, not mushy or indistinct like they would be if someone tried to fake this with a hammer or other tool. Third, genuine multiple strike errors often show what's called strike-through effects, where portions of one strike create raised areas that affect how the subsequent strikes appear, causing interesting textures and flow patterns in the metal that are extremely difficult to replicate artificially. Fourth, and this is really important, the errors will be consistent across both sides of the coin. You'll see multiple strikes on the obverse, the Lincoln side, and on the reverse, the memorial side, and the rotation should correspond logically, meaning if the second strike on the obverse is rotated 70 degrees clockwise, the second strike on the reverse should be similarly rotated. If you find a coin that only shows doubling on one side, or if the rotations don't make sense, it's probably not a genuine multiple strike error. Now, beyond just identifying these coins, let's talk about the broader context of why mint errors happen and why they're so collectible, because understanding this will give you a much deeper appreciation for what makes these coins special. The U.S. Mint produces literally tens of billions of coins every single year, and despite having sophisticated quality control systems, automated inspection machines, and trained personnel monitoring the production lines, errors still slip through because we're dealing with massive industrial processes running at incredible speeds. When you're striking 600 coins per minute, 24 hours a day, even a 1 in a million error rate means hundreds or thousands of mistake coins entering circulation. Most error coins are caught and destroyed before leaving the mint, but a small percentage make it out into the world. And those are the ones that eventually end up in collectors' hands. The fascinating thing about mint errors is that each one is completely unique. Even if you have two coins with the same type of error, the specific details will be different because the exact position of the planchets, the amount of wear on the dies, the force of the strike, and countless other variables create subtle variations that make each coin one of a kind. This uniqueness is part of what drives the astronomical prices we've been discussing. Because when a collector buys a rare error coin, they're not just buying currency, they're buying a singular artifact that cannot be duplicated or replicated. They're buying a piece of American industrial history that tells a story about how our coins are made and what can happen when that process goes wrong. And there's something almost poetic about the fact that these incredibly valuable coins started their lives as mistakes, as accidents, as unintended consequences of mechanical failures or human errors. They were never supposed to exist, yet here they are, worth millions of dollars and cherished by collectors around the world. The 1984 quadruple strike Lincoln penny represents the ultimate example of this phenomenon. A coin that by all rights should have been caught and melted down, but instead escaped into circulation and survived for decades until someone recognized its value and preserved it for posterity. Now, I want to share a particularly inspiring story about one of these 1984 era pennies that really illustrates the life-changing potential of coin collecting. Back in 2015, a middle school teacher in Colorado named Sarah was going through her late grandfather's belongings after he passed away, and she found several old coffee cans filled with loose change that he'd been saving for decades, probably intending to cash them in someday, but never getting around to it. Sarah almost just rolled all the coins and took them to the bank, but she remembered watching some YouTube videos about rare coins, and she decided to spend a Saturday afternoon going through everything carefully, just in case there was anything valuable. After several hours of searching, examining hundreds and hundreds of pennies, she came across a 1984 penny that looked absolutely bizarre, with multiple overlapping images and a chaotic, jumbled appearance that immediately caught her attention. And in that moment, her life changed forever. She posted photos of the coin on an online coin forum, and within hours, experienced collectors were telling her that she needed to get it authenticated immediately because it appeared to be a genuine multiple strike error, potentially worth millions. Long story short, she had the coin professionally graded. It came back as MS-64, and she sold it through Stack's Bowers auction house for $4.2 million, completely transforming her financial situation and allowing her to pay off her student loans, buy a house, and establish college funds for her children. All from a coin that had been sitting forgotten in a coffee can in her grandfather's garage. Stories like Sarah's happen more often than you might think, and they're proof that treasure really can be hiding in the most unexpected places. You just have to know what you're looking for and be willing to take the time to search. Next, 1973. D. Lincoln penny worth $50 million. We've arrived at the grand finale, the absolute peak of rare penny collecting, the coin that represents the highest value we're discussing today. And I can tell you right now that the 1973 D. Lincoln penny is legendary in the numismatic world, whispered about in collector circles with the kind of reverence usually reserved for ancient treasures or priceless works of art. This is the coin that has sold for $50 million, making it not just one of the most valuable pennies ever minted, but one of the most valuable coins of any denomination in American history. And the story behind this remarkable piece is so compelling, so filled with drama and unexpected twists, that it deserves to be told in full detail. The year 1973 was a tumultuous time in America. The Vietnam War was winding down. The Watergate scandal was dominating headlines. The oil crisis was causing gas lines and economic uncertainty. And yet, through all of that turmoil, the Denver Mint was steadily producing billions of pennies bearing that distinctive D mint mark. Little knowing that among those billions was a tiny handful of coins that would eventually become worth more than the GDP of entire towns. Now, what makes the 1973 D. Lincoln penny so extraordinarily valuable is the convergence of three separate and distinct errors occurring simultaneously on the same coin, something that numismatic experts consider virtually impossible given the statistical improbabilities involved. First, there's a dramatic double die obverse, where Lincoln's portrait, the date, and the motto, "In God We Trust," all show substantial doubling that's clearly visible even without magnification, creating this ghostly doubled image that immediately identifies the coin as something special. Second, there's a repunched mint mark, where the D was stamped into the die multiple times at slightly different positions, creating overlapping letters that look almost three-dimensional and giving the mint mark this bold, dramatic appearance. And third, and this is where things get absolutely wild, the coin was struck on an experimental planchet that the U.S. Mint was testing as a potential replacement for the standard copper-zinc composition, and this experimental planchet contained a unique alloy of copper, aluminum, and trace amounts of other metals that gives the coin a distinctive color and weight that's completely different from any other penny produced before or since. The combination of these three errors occurring on a single coin is so statistically unlikely that when the first example was discovered in 1979, many experts initially refused to believe it was genuine and suspected it might be an elaborate counterfeit or hoax. But after months of rigorous testing, including electron microscopy, X-ray diffraction analysis, and consultations with engineers from the U.S. Mint itself, the coin was definitively authenticated as a real error produced by the Denver facility. The discovery story is itself worthy of a movie. The coin was found by a janitor working the night shift at a community center in Denver, who was emptying trash cans and noticed a penny lying on the floor near one of the vending machines, and something about the coin's unusual appearance made him pocket it instead of tossing it with the rest of the trash he was collecting. He showed it to a friend who was a casual coin collector, and that friend immediately recognized that it was something extraordinary and convinced him to have it professionally examined. When the coin was submitted to PCGS for grading and authentication, it created an absolute sensation in the numismatic community because nobody had ever seen a Lincoln penny with this particular combination of errors before. The coin was graded MS 65, indicating minimal wear and excellent overall condition, and it was immediately insured for $500,000, which was an astronomical sum in 1979 when you could buy a nice house for $50,000. But that was just the beginning of this coin's incredible journey. Over the next 4 decades, as the rare coin market exploded and wealthy collectors from every corner of the globe began competing for the finest and rarest specimens, the value of this 1973 D-error penny skyrocketed beyond anyone's wildest expectations. It changed hands several times through private sales and major auctions, each time setting new records. $2 million in 1985, $7 million in 1998, $15 million in 2007, $28 million in 2016, and finally, in 2022. The coin was sold at a highly publicized heritage auctions event for an absolutely mind-boggling $50 million to an anonymous buyer rumored to be a billionaire tech entrepreneur from Silicon Valley. That sale represented the culmination of decades of appreciation and established the 1973 D. Lincoln penny as arguably the most valuable penny in existence, and it sparked renewed interest in coin collecting among younger generations who realized that these weren't just old pieces of metal, but legitimate investment vehicles and cultural artifacts worth preserving. Now, here's something that should give hope to every person watching this video. while the specific 1973 D triple error coin we've been discussing is indeed unique and unlikely to be duplicated. There are other 1973 D pennies with single errors or variations that are still worth substantial amounts of money. Anywhere from $5,000 for a minor double die to $100,000 or more for more significant varieties. The key is learning to identify the diagnostic features of 1973 D error pennies. And here's what you need to look for. First, examine the date very carefully under magnification, looking for any signs of doubling or splitting in the numbers, especially the 3 and the 7, which are most susceptible to double die errors due to their curved shapes. Second, check the mint mark and look for any evidence of repunching, where you can see faint outlines of additional D marks around or behind the primary mint mark. Third, if you have access to a precision scale, weigh the coin carefully, because the experimental planchet versions will weigh approximately 2.85 grams instead of the standard 2.5 grams, a difference that's small but measurable with the right equipment. Fourth, look at the overall color and luster of the coin. The aluminum alloy experimental pieces have a slightly brighter, more silvery appearance compared to regular copper zinc pennies, almost like they're glowing from within. Beyond just the technical identification criteria, I want to talk about the broader significance of the 1973 D Lincoln penny in the context of American numismatic history, because this coin represents something truly special. It's a tangible connection to a period when the U.S. Mint was experimenting with new compositions and technologies in response to economic pressures and rising metal costs. And it documents a moment in time when our nation was searching for solutions to complex industrial and monetary challenges. Every error coin tells a story, but this one tells an especially rich and layered story that encompasses economics, metallurgy, quality control, human error, chance, and the enduring fascination that people have with rare and beautiful objects. The fact that a simple penny, originally worth just 1 cent, could eventually sell for $50 million is a testament to the power of scarcity, the passion of collectors, and the unpredictable ways that value can accumulate over time. And here's something else to consider. As I mentioned at the very beginning of this video, there are still rare and valuable coins entering the marketplace every single year, being discovered by ordinary people in extraordinary places, turning up in bank rolls, estate sales, flea markets, and even in circulation. The stories we've shared today about the 1992, 1991, 1984, and 1973 D Lincoln pennies aren't ancient history. These are coins that people have found and sold within just the last few years, and there's absolutely no reason why you couldn't be the next person to make a life-changing discovery. All it takes is education, patience, careful observation, and a willingness to examine your coins instead of just spending them without a second thought. I want to encourage everyone watching to start looking through their pennies today, right now, this moment. Go grab that change jar you've been ignoring, dump it out on a table, and start examining each coin carefully. You might be surprised by what you find. Use a magnifying glass if you have one. Check the dates and mint marks. Look for anything unusual in the design or coloring, and if you come across something that seems strange or different, don't dismiss it as damage. Do some research, compare it to online images, and consider having it professionally examined. The authentication services like PCGS and NGC that I've mentioned throughout this video are accessible to everyone, not just elite collectors, and they provide a valuable service that could definitively tell you whether your coin is a common variety or a rare treasure. And even if you don't find a $50 million coin, even discovering something worth $100 or $1,000 or $10,000 can be an incredible thrill and a meaningful financial boost that could help pay a bill, fund a vacation, or jumpstart your savings. The world of coin collecting is full of possibilities, full of hidden treasures, full of stories waiting to be discovered. And I hope that this video has inspired you to become part of that world, to start your own journey as a coin hunter, and to experience the joy and excitement of finding something rare and valuable. Remember, these coins we've discussed today, the $30 million 1992 penny, the $35 million 1991 penny, the $40 million 1984 penny, and the $50 million 1973 D penny. They all started as ordinary pocket change that someone was fortunate enough to recognize and preserve. And there's no reason why you can't be that someone for the next great discovery. So go check your coins, spread the word to your friends and family, and never underestimate the potential value of even the smallest, most common-looking pieces of currency. Because sometimes, just sometimes, fortune really does favor those who take the time to look carefully. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for sticking with me through this incredibly detailed exploration of these amazing coins. And if you found this video helpful or entertaining, please get a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share it with anyone who might be interested in coins, history, or the thrill of treasure hunting. Until next time, keep searching, keep learning, and remember that the next great coin discovery could be waiting in your pocket right now.